Hey everybody, it's Chanchai, and I've mostly pretty much recovered from COVID. I'll be cleaning myself up soon, and I've already resumed work, but I'm going to be putting myself out there in a nicer presentation again soon. But today, I'm still pretty scruffy. Anyways, this is going to be technically episode 2 of Chanchai's Dojo, and today I wanted to talk about, I'd like to talk about focus is the main topic, and it all gets into a nebulous cloud of topics of focus, mental stack, which is basically the application of focus and capacity of it, and also comfort, which is a really big deal when managing your focus. Comfort is also a big deal when assessing your opponents, how to fight them, and your approach to fighting them effectively, especially in a game like Virtua Fighter or any activity where you have repeated challenges, like rapid pace challenges to each other, which could even include stuff like poker, where you have to suss out how much your opponent is, what they're willing to do and not willing to do, and what they're comfortable with and not comfortable with. So again, today's topic is going to be about comfort. I'll try to project my voice right now. It's going to be a little hard to do that, but I'm going to try to, so that this video can be heard better. Okay, so comfort or focus. Let's start with focus, because that's where we're supposed to start. Focus, again, is mental energy. Not like a mystical energy or anything. It's just, I would just say that it's basically the amount of effort put into doing a task, and kind of like, not exactly like, you'll have, each person's got a lot of amount of focus, but tasks that you are not familiar with will use up more focus. Tasks you're very comfortable with doing requires very little focus. I'm driving a car right now, and driving is a perfect example, because when you first learn how to drive, when you're taking lessons from your parent or your friend or your sibling or your uncle, you're in a state that's a little more nervous because you're not so familiar, and because you're not really familiar with driving. You have a concept in mind of what driving is, but you're now starting to actually do it. Then all the tasks in driving, learning how to defensively drive and watch the road, watch the other cars, make decisions, they all require more focus when you're learning how to drive. However, at some point you start to get more and more comfortable with driving, because you're more able to assess those situations with not even the conscious mind. You actually just process them very easily subconsciously, and so you're able to drive with very little focus. Within half a year to a year, most people are able to do that. Some people do lose something when they start making driving a very background process, a process that's happening on the back of their mind instead of the front of their mind. Sometimes you do lose out things. You create habits, and some details you're not paying as much attention to. Hopefully you train yourself to pay attention to all the details still, and every once in a while refresh yourself so that you're able to do more with less focus, instead of just doing moderate amount with way less focus. So driving is a good example. Learning a job, another fantastic example. When I have to train a server, when they're first learning my way, that takes a lot of focus. They're going to make mistakes. Those first 2 weeks, they will absolutely make they'll do things ways that I don't want them to do, and I have to teach them, and they're nervous about that. As time goes by, they get more and more comfortable, uses less focus. There is a little drop off, like they might get a little loosey-goosey with my policies, and then I have to remind them, and that kind of puts them back in a state of being a little uncomfortable, and then using more focus. But they'll eventually get back to needing less focus. The more they do a job, the easier it is for them, and it's easier because it requires less focus, because it's something that you just kind of know what to do, and hopefully in time you understand. So focus is really important, especially in Virtua Fighter. And in Virtua Fighter, you're going to have to manage your focus a lot. When you're first learning Virtua Fighter, for a lot of people, a good quote is like Juicebox once said that when someone asked Juicebox like, how easy is it to learn Virtua Fighter, he seriously joked about, he said, if you haven't played fighting games before, it's probably pretty easy. But if you have played other fighting games, it might be a little harder. And that's because a lot of what you do in Virtua Fighter is actually pretty simple. But if you're bringing these preconceived notions, you're spending a lot of effort like unlearning or like learning the different way that Virtua Fighter does things, and having to fight that pre-existing knowledge. And you're just in a state of discomfort for a while because things might not play as you expected based on the other game, or based on what you're forgetting that you're trying to so hard to learn now. So that's kind of the role focus kind of has there. So but also in Virtua Fighter, the reason veterans like have such a huge skill, there's such a skill barrier when you fight somebody stronger than you in Virtua Fighter. A lot of times that big barrier or a big chunk of that is a difference in how much focus is required to do what is needed to win the situation, to how much focus is required to figure it out. So when you fight an opponent that's really strong, they're probably way more familiar with the situations you're getting yourself into and the situations you're presenting to them. So because they're so accustomed to it, it takes almost like they kind of know the answer right away. You know, it's like someone who knows the multiplication tables and another person who totally doesn't, and the teacher suddenly throws a pop quiz at everybody, you know, on multiplication. And so, you know, that's kind of the challenge you face in Virtua Fighter when you fight someone stronger, at least at first. And then, but it is similar at the highest levels, because there's also there's like a lot of situations that they're just aware of and have already trained themselves heavily, so that it doesn't take much of a thought for them to find the answer, but it takes you a lot of thought to figure out how to present them a challenge, a puzzle, or a problem that they're going to have to sit there and focus on. So again, focus is the amount of mental energy that you have to use to solve your problems. And when learning Virtua Fighter, when you start out, everything requires a lot of your focus. You know, you'll be obsessed over this one thing, but the hard part is that one of the keys to managing focus is a state of relaxation. Being relaxed actually lowers the amount of focus that's used. But more important than that is the training. Practice very basic things. Later on, I'm going to do a video about, and you know, we'll do with gameplay video of like jab elbow. Why is jab elbow so important? Why is Chanchai always talking about jab into elbow? Well, it's something that actually is strong in so many situations. Almost all situations it's strong, and yet once you get used to it, it requires like zero focus. So it's something that you're able to do and your opponent has to deal with, and then you can assess with very little focus. Once you're comfortable with the situations, you can assess what they're doing with your jab elbow, and that will tell you what you need to know on how to beat them. In a lot of cases, it will tell you if they know how to deal with the situation or if they don't. And the way for them to increase to load your mental stack, your cognitive load, one way is that they can challenge that basic situation and make you pay for it, and make you have to think about how you're going to deal with with what they're doing, you know. So again, focus is really important, and it helps to understand that this is kind of this invisible metric that Virtua Fighter doesn't have like meters or anything like that. But in reality, you as a player actually do have a meter that you're running on, and that we could call that cognitive load. You can call it the focus meter if you want, and it works. Usually, it works on the thing where it's like increased usage of focus, decreased usage, and it's a moving bar, you know. And you'll be fully exhausted mentally when that focus meter is depleted, or or when your stack is way overloaded, you know. And so that's basically into the second topic, or the subtopic, which is mental stack. And mental stack is an excellent topic. The Japanese players have already understood this, and mental stack is something that High Fight videos, they're a fighting game community member who makes awesome videos, and they've been, you know, last year and the year before, they were talking about mental stack quite a bit, and it's a really important topic. So mental stack is basically how much you're taking on when your opponent is presenting you with challenges and you've got to find solutions to them, and they make it harder and harder and harder. Your mental stack's getting overloaded. But also in the High Fight example, it's also kind of when you kind of do a split focus. And the example High Fight would use is like in footsies and Street Fighter, where it takes a lot of focus to really focus on just the footsie and to really do it the proper way. And yet sometimes you have a 2-in-1 answer that could reduce the load, because what it does is it makes it so you don't have to focus so heavily on these different possibilities. You can just focus on a few set possibilities while you're doing that, and that will lower the load on your mental stack. However, the problem is that your opponent is going to put problem A in front of you, and then they can suddenly switch it to problem B, and that completely will overload you, and you'll be spending time reallocating your rearranging your mental stack, and kind of going, okay, I need to now worry about this, and I need to adjust properly how I play. So you can get into deeper concepts by looking at High Fight's videos, and I think there's some other videos about mental stack, but it is very much related on focus management. Okay, so let's talk about the third topic. So we've talked about focus, and I only talked a little bit about mental stack because it's a very deep topic and probably requires its own video, but just kind of this idea of how you're managing that. But let's talk about comfort. Comfort's much easier to apply and understand with relation to focus. Comfort is exactly as it sounds. It is what you are comfortable, it's the range that you're comfortable doing things, how familiar you are with them, how well practiced you are with it. So jab elbow is a very easy thing to practice and to apply in every VF game. You don't have to wait for it to happen. You can just apply it right away. And that's why it's going to be my basic examples: how to use a jab, how to use a low jab, how to use an elbow, how to use a throw. The basics, Pete. Those I focus in the beginning because they also, once you understand them, those tools work in so many situations, and when you've gotten used to it, they will use less of your focus. They will be things you can do almost automatically, so your focus, instead of being used for application, will be used for reading your opponent, will be used for conditioning your opponent. That's where you want to put your mental energy, is on tasks like that, instead of the basics of how do I throw a jab, or when do I use that jab. Just kind of train yourself so that you know when to use it, when it automatically is a good option, and what to do right away. And so the more you train yourself, the less energy it will require of you, but also the more comfortable you are with it, the better you'll be at it. Use less energy. Comfort's really important. Discomfort is really important. Discomfort is how you figure out, in a game like Virtua Fighter, it's not just outplaying your opponent. Outplaying is one way to do it, but outplaying actually has some limits to it. You need to understand that Virtua Fighter always has a choice, and you don't have to just play the perfect game to win. You just need to have the right answers for your opponent to win, and do it and make that matchup work better. So better rewards, lower your risk, increase your rewards, put yourself in situations that will do all those things for you. But also, but a very easy thing to understand about your opponent is how comfortable they are. Because that was, when you fight their discomfort, doesn't matter what the textbook risk reward is, or it matters, but it matters less. If you find a situation where your opponent is not comfortable with at all, you will increase the focus the cognitive load on them. You'll increase how much focus they have to use to counter you, because you're constantly assaulting them on uncomfortable ground. Really important to understand this when you play Virtua Fighter. You can sense it. You can see in your opponent's speedy responses, in their clean technique, what's making them comfortable or what they're comfortable doing to you. But when you start to see them stall, when you see signs that they're slowing down, when you see that their answer is not exactly that good, they could have had a much better answer, you're finding areas where they are either uncomfortable or not optimal. Optimal we'll talk about another time, but let's focus on the comfort today. And if you can figure out that, if you can see that situation is uncomfortable and you keep doing that to them, yeah, maybe their comfort will increase over time, but right away, right now, that's the thing they're uncomfortable with right now. That's what you go for. That's what I go for. When I fight my opponents, I sense what they're comfortable with, and I sense what they're not comfortable with, and I attack them on those grounds, or I try to. When an opponent like Y2D fights me, Y2D has my number right now. I'm working on improving that matchup, but right now, it does not require Y2D much effort, much focus to do the damage to me, but it requires so much focus from me to do the damage against them, and I'm working on improving that. But that's how I know where we stand in the matchup. Not because of the character, but because of how quick he has the solution to me, and how slow I have the solution to them, and how many times I have to win situations, use so much focus energy, mental energy, to defeat Y2D. That's where we are right now. But I'm going to work on improving that. But against most players in North America, I'm pretty comfortable against most of them. And it's but that's also how I know when I'm fighting an opponent that's going to be very scary. I will know right away from my comfort level. Once I'm just uncomfortable, I kind of know. And there's a degree to which we love that challenge. We love fighting an opponent that makes you uncomfortable. It takes and then from there, it's kind of a long ways before we get to a despair point. But for the most part, when we sense somebody is not letting us autopilot, because autopilot at the high level is still fine because it's using very little cognitive load. What's important for the high level player is how to transition once the opponent does things, makes you uncomfortable, and makes you use more energy to win the situations. That's how we know that we've got an opponent that warrants our attention and how we're going to have to defeat them. Another time we can talk about another topic called like the zone, right? And the zone is an interesting one, but that's very different. The zone is a situation where you're so uncomfortable, but you're so highly trained, so highly focused, and you know the challenges and you've been preparing for the challenges, but a variety of elements, including your opponent, where you're playing, the stakes, how important this match is to you, all those things combine to push you into the state where you're mentally in an emergency, like a firefighter, or like for me in the restaurant when I walk in and it's slammed and the servers don't know what to do and I have to fix everything on the front, or when my best cook has an insane amount of orders, especially the stove cook, the line cook, and they have to manage everything on the stove and everything on the cutting board and everything at the frying station, and they just have an insane amount of workload, but they've been trained for it. They know the situation, but it's an emergency, so they're pushing their brain power to the highest level, and everything is in slow motion. Well, not really slow motion, but it's kind of like slow motion, but we're in the zone. It happens in basketball. It is kind of like what you see in that anime Kuroko's basketball, which is where this heightened sense where you're just super good at this one task, whether it's for me managing the front area, my cook managing the cooking, or a basketball player a tennis player in the moment during. This is why you see some players can rise in like a tiebreaker situation or on the big points. Suddenly they're playing like out of their freaking mind. That's the zone. And then what that is you're focused, you're in an emergency situation, and your adrenaline is off the charts. And it only lasts usually like half an hour. After that half hour, you're kind of like back to normal and everything. You feel a little more sluggish. But that's hyper focus, and that would be the zone. And we'll talk about that sometime. But now I've already explained what the zone is, but it's really cool when you experience it, especially in a tournament. Doesn't guarantee you the win. I experienced in a situation where I still ended up losing once the zone was gone. But it was an amazing experience to play Virtua Fighter in that situation. And with the zone kicking in, and I'm winning a lot of situations, and felt like I could like edit my moves in real time. I couldn't undo what I already did, but it was like I'm about to do this and I know I'm about to do that. Let's change it to this, like in real time doing that, and then change your move, and then change what you're going to do. That was really cool. It's a cool experience, but the zone also has its limits. But again, back on the topic of focus, it's important to understand that as a player, as a beginner, you're at a disadvantage when it comes to focus. So your goals aren't to win all your matches when you're learning or when you're developing. Your goals are to improve your skill sets, to get more comfortable with different situations, with your opponent changing the answer, changing the question posed to you, and then process it and go, okay, maybe I should have done this. And some of it is execution, but execution is not the only thing. A proper way to manage the problem also when you're a developing player, beginner or intermediate or even advanced, is that when you're using your focus, there are things that you do that can really ruin your focus, that could like use more of it. So what are those things? Well, getting frustrated will increase the cognitive load of everything you do. So getting frustrated increases the load. It makes your focus meter less efficient because it means now you have to use more focus than when you were relaxed, way more, sometimes twice as much. That's why being relaxed is important. Being relaxed is not about, oh, I'm just going to ignore everything. That's not what it is. Being relaxed is just being cool under pressure. And you want to be cool under pressure. When you get frustrated, certain answers you'll do better because you're so determined to win those, to answer those questions. But instead of being able to, moderately handle like 20 questions, you're in a position where you're you're ready to windmill slam on 5 questions, but you still got 15 questions that you can't answer, and you answer way worse. On balance, that's worse. So being frustrated doesn't help you. Yeah, it might prime you to do a good answer on 5 questions, but then you still have 15 other questions you got to deal with. And when you're frustrated, you're just blind to them. You're going to try to answer questions 6 through 20 the same way you answered 1 through 5, and it doesn't work that way. So understand that getting frustrated is worse for your focus. Relax is still better for your focus. But you can use your frustration to just prime yourself to have a really good answer for that other thing, but you still got to work on dealing with everything else. So sometimes it works for you, but I'd say that's like a 20% in this example, 25% in this example. So 25% good answer, 75% bad answer is not really fun. It's not a winning formula. So try to be relaxed, not because you want to be so, kumbaya. That's not what it's about. Relax is about maintaining good performance. Relax is about making it easier for you to manage your focus. And in Virtua Fighter, you got to manage it a lot. Sometime I will talk about the sunk cost fallacy, but I'll make it short. Sunk cost fallacy is just basically Like, let's say you had an answer prepared for your opponent and you just keep wanting to do it, and you just keep putting yourself in the situation to want to make that answer. That's bad. You can't force your opponent. You can guide what your opponent does, you can condition them, but you certainly can't force them psychically into doing what you want them to do. And the more that they catch on to what you're trying to do, then if you keep pushing that one situation, it's just not going to work. And in fact, it becomes your biggest weakness. It becomes how to beat you. So you can't get obsessive about this one way you want to beat your opponent. The sunk cost fallacy is basically when you put personal investment in something and you're like, I got to keep doing that thing because of all I've put in. Bad relationship, I got to stay in this bad relationship because of all the good times we did have, and because of all the effort I put in to making this relationship work. If it's not going to work, it's not going to work. That's a sunk cost, and sometimes you should let it go. Investment's the same way. I put so much money in this company, I'm not going to let it go now. That's a sunk cost fallacy. You need to see a path out. You need to see a way for it to work, but you don't act in spite of it because of the money you already put in or the time you put in already. That's called a sunk cost fallacy. Sunk cost fallacy is the most human thing ever. Every human does it because we have strong attachments. And that's fine for me. Though in Buddhism, the big deal of Buddhism is to learn how to be detached. But I'm not a Buddhist. But I study different religions, and so Buddhism, that's a big deal. But sunk cost fallacy is this, like, having this idea and just wanting to stick with that idea and putting so much energy into setting it up and then feeling that's the only way you're going to win. Yeah. That's going to waste your focus. It's a very non-optimal use of your focus. And that's not proper play. It's most likely going to lead you to lose. So understand things like that. That's another thing to be aware of that's going to drain your focus, right? The biggest way to, again, I'm going to repeat what I said earlier, but the biggest way make your focus manage it better is to get familiar with situations, train them, focus on learning all these different situations, and figuring out how to quickly have the answer for them the next time. You know, hey, Kage did 9 kick plus guard, that overhead kick flip, forward flip against me, and I blocked it, and I think I'm -2. He's +2. So what happened? I tried to attack him and he interrupted. Well, I shouldn't do that. So I go to training mode and I'll have the AI do that, and then you learn, I can evade, I can fuzzy guard. Fuzzy guard's a pretty amazing option there. And if I can do that without thinking about it, it's a non-focus option and it beats almost everything he's gonna do, right? You have the answer, you're comfortable with the situation now, much less use of your focus. So it's really good to train yourself, understand the situation. That's what the stronger player has over you. Catch up. That's an easy way to catch up. So those are things about managing focus, understanding. Again, later on I'm going to talk about jab into elbow. And here's the shortcut answer. As long as high jab makes contact with your opponent, you can generally do an elbow. Now there's 4 characters that can challenge that, but we'll talk later about that. But don't even worry about that. Just do it just to see if they're going to actually challenge it. Don't worry about it until they challenge it. So you just practice it. You can jab elbow, and it works a lot. It beats so many things. Elbow is a mid-arm attack. And aside from reversals, there's not really that many sabakis that deal with it. There are some, but it stops them from trying to crush your low punch. It stops them from trying to crush your high punch. Elbow is a safe mid, and later we'll talk about safe mids. We'll talk about jab, elbow, throw, and that includes low jab too. So, these are things that I don't have to think about. That's why I can talk about them so easily, and why I keep doing them. And it's not the only way to play, but it's a very low investment way for me to play and see what my opponent's capable of doing. And it's like, can you handle this? Can you handle this? Oh, you can? Okay, well, let's see if you can handle this other thing. That's how we play VF. That's how we condition our opponents. That's how we read what they're doing. You give them very simple situations and you see if they can beat them. And if they can, well, we'll move it to the next part. And it doesn't take me much to think about that. You just do it. So in VF, that's why the basics are important. And it's not like they're win-all situations, but there are ways to challenge your opponent to think of how are they going to do their better stuff, right? How are you going to do your better stuff? Again, that part takes quite a bit of focus. Mental stack is a good thing to get familiar with now so that we can talk more about it later. But mental stack is a great concept, and it's going to apply in Virtua Fighter. It applies in Street Fighter 5. It's definitely going to apply in Street Fighter 6. And I also think in King of Fighters it's pretty important to understand because of the way that game mixes up on rushdowns. So any kind of game like that where you're like rapid fire forcing your opponent to respond over and over and over again, yeah, mental stack's a big deal to learn and to kind of figure out how you're going to apply it in a game like Virtua Fighter. So, and then finally comfort. And why was comfort important? Comfort was important today because comfort is a good sign of somebody who's efficiently using focus. When they're comfortable, any task that you do comfortably requires the least amount of focus. Your opponent pushing you into discomfort will force you to use a lot of focus, and you're going to make a lot more mistakes at that time, and you could be confused, you could get angry, you're going to sweat when you're uncomfortable, and when you are comfortable, it's no sweat, and that's all this is about. So understand that that's the dynamic at play, especially in Virtua Fighter, but in any fighting game, and you're going to have a better time if you just spend a little bit of time to train to understand some situations. You don't have to understand everything. You don't have to overload yourself on study tonight, but you can study a little bit tonight, really get to understand it. Study a little bit more tomorrow, really get to understand that. Just try to understand a new thing every day, just a little thing. And before you know it, you're going to have a strong pool of knowledge to work with. And with that practice a little bit today and a little bit tomorrow. Get familiar with the situation. Why did it work? Or why not? Just a little part of it. And before you know it, you're going to have a lot of situations you're comfortable with and able to throw at your opponent and see what they're not comfortable with. So, finally, when I play strong players like, let's say, Renzo, he'll also, like, when we're playing, if I do something that, like, if there's a situation he's doing and I finally have, like, a good answer for it, he might out loud say, oh my gosh, like, you do know what to do there, right? He's been testing me. And it's not that he was playing easy on me. So let's talk about, before we end, let's talk about another fallacy that a lot of beginners and developing players make. Just because the opponent is testing you, it doesn't mean that they're just playing easy on you. It's not really like that. They are testing you because that's how you play a game of conditioning. That's how you play a game like Virtua Fighter. They're cruising on what they need to do to win against you. You should not take that personally. If you take that personally, you're increasing the cognitive load on you. Doing exactly the opposite of what I said you should be doing here. If you take it personally, all of your next actions are going to require a lot more focus because you're so distracted with the noise of anger and frustration and maybe shame, but you shouldn't feel shamed. But I understand people feel shame because they're not perfect. You should not think that you're ever perfect. Everybody's imperfect. And there's no perfect answer, but there are better answers. But definitely a bad answer is to get angry. Definitely a bad answer is to take things personally. Because once you go there, we go into another topic called tilt control. Tilt is the enemy of focus. complete enemy of focus. It's also the enemy of intelligence. You end up doing the stupidest things on tilt. You don't want tilt. You don't want to let yourself get angry for no reason. It's okay to lose situations in Virtua Fighter. It's okay to get hit because of this. It's okay to repeatedly get hit because of it. At some point, it also has an effect of conditioning your opponent because it gives you the opportunity to completely counter what they're doing to you at some point. When you figure it out, when you've cooled off and managed yourself. So don't get angry, don't get upset because your opponent is presenting basic challenges to you, basic questions that you have answers for. And I'll tell you this, no matter what you think in Virtua Fighter, there's more than one answer. There's always multiple answers in this game. Sometimes we like to think there's just this one answer, and so I gotta play this way, and he's making me play this way. It's the only way to win. That's not correct. That's absolutely not correct at all. There's a lot of different answers, but it takes time to kind of find them. And I think it's just a bad excuse. It's a bad excuse when people try to say, oh, you know, I know how to beat them, but like, it's just not fun to beat them. Give me a break. That's an excuse. You know, I'm sorry, but try to overcome it. Try to force them into playing a more fun game, because you are able to do that in this game. I guarantee that. It gets a lot more fun when you challenge them, because they're going to stop playing that way when you beat it. Usually. Hopefully. And if they don't, well, you'll win. But if they do change, it's become a lot more interesting. So, again, manage yourself, manage your emotions, be relaxed, and understand that, yeah, you're at a disadvantage when you're learning the game. So your goal shouldn't be just always to win against really strong players, but your goal should be to get better at all the situations they're giving you and try to learn at least a little something each time you play. Okay? You do that, you're better before you know it. You're still learning, and you realize you're now beating a lot of other people, and now they're looking to you to learn from you, and the cycle of teaching and learning this great game of Virtua Fighter continues. That's why I love Virtua Fighter. I find out something new all the time, still, even after 10 years of this one version of the game. And it's just so much fun. And when you can get there, when you can play and manage your focus and feel your comfort and discomfort, and then push your opponent, figure out what they're comfortable and not comfortable with, and then figuring out how to overload their mental stack, VF becomes insanely fun. So much fun that's why there's a lot of us Virtua Fighter players that just might play a lot of other fighting games a lot less when we get to this point with this game, because it's a real joy, and I'm sure a lot of the other games have it, but VF really, really has it. It's hard to explain how fun it is when that happens, but I think a lot of people get the sense of it, because that's why I see the people that get hooked on VF get hooked. So I hope you find that path too, and I will show more concrete video stuff of the gameplay. It's just sometimes I like to have these talks because this topic is very important. So again, focus, mental stack, comfort. That's what we talked about today in my long-winded way, and I hope we can have more fun chats on theory soon, but I also hope to show you guys a lot more of the gameplay too. Have a good one, take care, and thanks for hanging out in Chanchai's dojo. Cheers.